The president of Texas Motor Speedway steps down. Nashville residents share some of their concerns about NASCAR's potential return to the fairgrounds, and NASCAR is loosening COVID restrictions. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. Lots of off-track news to get to react to here today, but first, if you're not already, be sure you are subscribed to the channel. We post almost daily. You're not going to want to miss any of the news, any of the rumors, any of the race reactions we do here at Out of the Groove, so make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. While you're down in the description, also be sure to check out the latest from the Out of the Groove Podcast Network, A Lifetime in NASCAR, Noah Talks NASCAR, and the NASCAR Weekly Podcast that we streamed last night right here on this channel. Catch up on all the latest and greatest from Out of the Groove and much, much more. Thank you all so much for the support. The NASCAR conversation never slows down, and that is indeed the case today. We're going to start this episode with some breaking news this morning. Eddie Gossage, the president of Texas Motor Speedway since the very beginning, the track is celebrating their 25th year of operation this season, announced that he will be stepping down from that position after this June's All-Star race. The announcement kind of came out of nowhere. Eddie Gossage has worked within Speedway Motorsports for around 30 years. He's 62 years old right now. You probably can't name many track presidents in NASCAR, but Eddie Gossage has to be one of the most notorious. I mean that in both good and bad ways. One of the few remaining old school promoters out there. As someone who's been going to races at Texas Motor Speedway since 2005, I've seen many of Eddie Gossage's ideas firsthand. Known for themed weekends, they brought the Wild Asphalt Circus one year, No Limits Texas. This year for the All-Star race, it's like a super Wild West theme, of course. I've been to a race where they brought the Stadium Super Trucks into town alongside the Cup Xfinity and Truck Series. There's a packed weekend. Sheldon Creed, Robbie Gordon doing jumps on the infield. It was wild. In 2014, they built the world's largest LED HD television, Big Hoss, which still sits there almighty there on the back straightaway. Eddie Gossage has always subscribed to the idea that bigger is better. He bought into the, Texas narrative. Remember when Tony Stewart retired, he gave Tony Stewart like a 7-foot tall bobblehead of himself. I mean, one thing Eddie Gossage deserves a lot of credit for was bringing spectacle to what was otherwise just another mile-and-a-half track on the schedule. I mean, from like an aerial view looking down at Texas Motor Speedway, there's not a lot special about the track. There's like 5 more just like it on the schedule. But Eddie Gossage always found a way to make Texas Motor Speedway a bit unique, a bit different. One of my favorite tracks to watch races at growing up. Great facility to visit. Still to this day, even though the racing for both NASCAR and IndyCar especially has suffered dramatically the last few years, still a very great facility. The nearby area is great as well. So it did come as a bit of a shock today to hear Eddie Gossage, a lifelong racing fan, announcing his retirement. Now, for all the good, positive things I think Eddie Gossage has been at least somewhat responsible for in his career, some racing fans aren't huge supporters of Eddie Gossage. Eddie Gossage, he's always been an aggressive track president. He was the guy who demanded that a radius clause be put into both his NASCAR and IndyCar contracts so that the series couldn't race at any other venues within several hundred miles of Texas Motor Speedway. That's why it took so long for IndyCar to go to Circuit of the Americas down in Austin just a couple years ago. Of course, NASCAR is racing there this year, but they all had to wait for pre-existing contracts to expire. Gossage was also there for the infamous 2001 Firestone 600 kart series race that had to be canceled basically day of because the drivers were experiencing too severe G-forces going around the high banks at high speeds. It was a debacle. So there have been some highs and there've certainly been some lows during Eddie Gossage's Texas Motor Speedway tenure. Some fans are speculating that Eddie Gossage's departure may have something to do with the recent reconfiguration of Texas Motor Speedway when they decreased the banking in 1 and 2, repaved the whole track, and the racing, no matter what series we're talking about, has not been very good there the last few years. Eddie Gossage, always outspoken, took to Twitter to sort of absolve himself of some of the blame. Replying to one fan who criticized the repave and reconfiguration, Gossage said, "You're kidding, of course. A track president doesn't make those calls. Track paving, track reconfiguration. Don't at me because I won't answer any of them, but no track president makes such calls." Eddie Gossage, man, he's going down swinging. At least it's clear he understands that the racing has not been good at Texas Motor Speedway. He's not, blind to that fact, so respect that at least. I feel like, Eddie Gossage just kind of had to be out front of this whole thing since the very beginning. I find it hard to believe he didn't have something to do with the changes. I'm sure he's not happy with how the changes ultimately turned out. I'm sure Speedway Motorsports, the parent company of Texas, also played a huge role in these decisions. But man, Eddie Gossage, always outspoken to the very, very end. He will still be around through All-Star Race weekend next month, so fans who are going to be at Texas for that race, it'll be your last chance to, maybe shake hands with Eddie Gossage. He's a man of the people. He was always out and about. I credit him for that. Anyway, this is all worth talking about because, as I said at the very beginning, Eddie Gossage is one of the few remaining big, larger-than-life old-school track promoters, and with him leaving, it'll be interesting to see what kind of direction Speedway Motorsports and Texas Motor Speedway take from here. It's a track that's sort of at a crossroads. It used to be one of the biggest and most prestigious events on the Cup schedule, and I mean that with the utmost sincerity. As recently as just a few years ago, the only races that paid more to win on the Cup schedule were the Daytona 500 and the All-Star race than the two Texas Motor Speedway dates. That was just a few years ago, so it was a prestigious event. Now the track has seen much worse racing, extremely dwindling attendance, unfortunately, so we'll see where Speedway Motorsports takes the Speedway from here. Worth mentioning, it's technically my home track, so this kind of hit close to home. I mean, Eddie Gossage has been hit or miss in my eyes as well over the years, but certainly a larger-than-life track promoter whose presence will be missed at Texas Motor Speedway, even if that's, maybe for better or worse. Well, it remains to be seen. Texas Motor Speedway and Speedway Motorsports said that they will begin the search for a new track president very, very soon. Now let's talk about some COVID restrictions for a moment. Because also breaking today, NASCAR announces that masks will no longer be required outdoors in the garage area beginning this weekend at Dover. They still must be worn inside haulers and buildings. You see this report from Bob Pockrass. He says, NASCAR says with data showing COVID transmission outdoors around zero, it felt it was time to relax mask requirements in outdoor areas of pits and garage area. I think many fans will be excited to hear that news, very encouraged. I mean, fans aren't allowed in the infield or the garage area at all as of yet, but still encouraging that things are progressing. We already saw some restrictions lessened this last weekend at Darlington when more vaccinated media members were allowed in. I noticed the TV reporters on pit road were not wearing masks throughout much of the weekend. I'm very happy to see things progressing forward. There is that light at the end of the tunnel has gotten a lot bigger. Now some of the light is starting to hit our faces. We are ever closer to seeing normal NASCAR race weekends once again. I'm very excited for that. I'll be at a ton of tracks later this summer, and I'm hoping that I'm able to take you guys behind the scenes at some of these facilities, but there is still plenty of work to be done. Many people in the country are now vaccinated, or at the very least partially vaccinated. I'm fully vaccinated now, so I am ready to hit the racetrack, hit all of the racetracks I possibly can this summer. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope things continue to open up. Things hopefully continue to progress safely. The numbers continue to look good. Very exciting to see things getting ever closer to that pre-pandemic normalcy. I went to the last 3 races before the pandemic hit last March, and man, I miss seeing all the happy faces on pit road, in the garage area, and most importantly, in the stands. I'm glad that those days seem to be very nearly on the horizon once again. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this episode, and I'm not going to dwell on this too much. Many people have already shared their thoughts, given their takes and opinions on this over the last 24 or 36 hours, but we'll talk a little bit about Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway, because Tuesday, citizens of Nashville and nearby residents of Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway were given the opportunity to speak at the monthly Nashville Fair Board meeting. Many were there in support of Speedway Motorsport and Bristol Motor Speedway's bid to basically acquire or lease Nashville Fairgrounds and renovate it to bring NASCAR back in the coming years. Many were there, however, to oppose this plan, and both sides gave their takes. Darrell Waltrip was there actually in support of the racetrack, so it was kind of fun to see DW just at the podium. I did not expect that, but Darrell Waltrip, who lives in the Nashville area, given his 2 cents. Now, much of the focus that you've probably seen on Twitter or perhaps even from YouTube videos was put on a select number of speakers who were against the idea of NASCAR returning to the Nashville Fairgrounds. They were against the entire renovation plan altogether. Many of these naysayers were nearby residents, people who lived adjacent to the Speedway, because Nashville Fairgrounds is located in a very densely populated area of Nashville. It's only 2 or 3 miles away from downtown Nashville, which is kind of unheard of for a modern day NASCAR track. It's right there, sandwiched between houses. It's in a residential neighborhood, more or less. So many local residents got up behind the podium to voice their concerns. Many voiced very legitimate concerns about, parking. How will a track like this with limited space be able to accommodate 30 or 40,000 fans, which is what they're proposing? How's that going to work? Traffic, parking, that'll be a huge concern. That's definitely fair. Many, of course, raised concerns about the noise as well. That is one reason many NASCAR tracks are built kind of in the middle of nowhere, where the only thing the roar of those engines is really disrupting are, cows, they'll get over it. Many residents expressed noise concerns. Speedway Motorsports actually put out a proposal to mitigate the sound, to build some sound deadening structures to help limit some of those effects. But the point is, if NASCAR returns to the fairgrounds, it's going to be loud those 1 or 2 weekends a year that they're racing. A lot of you've probably seen the clip or heard the quotes from the one woman who lives near the track who cited that there are 5 Formula One tracks in Nashville, so clearly working with some bad information there. But her concerns largely came down to noise, some people concerned about schools nearby and things like that. I don't think NASCAR, which races on the weekends, would be a huge disruptor of schools, but certainly all legit concerns, and that's my takeaway from this. You know, it's fun to dunk on these people as much as we want. Yeah, yes, the woman who claimed there are 5 F1 tracks in Nashville clearly had bad information there, and we should inform her of what the actual stats, what the actual data is. But I don't think it's particularly productive for NASCAR fans en masse to kind of swarm all the naysayers and talk about how wrong they are, how foolish they are. I do not think that's particularly productive when we're trying to convince these same people that, hey, NASCAR is going to be a great positive thing for your community. Like right now, they're just seeing a bunch of angry NASCAR fans at their doorstep. They're getting slammed on social media. I'm sure that's not a great first impression. NASCAR fans are not leaving a great first impression on these people. Many of these people probably can't be convinced otherwise anyways. Maybe it's all a losing effort, but certainly I don't think it's productive to continue insulting or joking or laughing at their expense if you really want to, you know, effectively race in their backyard is what we're trying to accomplish here, because we all want the fairgrounds to return, if at all possible. And I think the best way to make the chances of that happening as likely as possible are by informing the naysayers when they get basic stats wrong, but also trying to convince these people in a way that demonstrate the benefits outweigh the inconveniences, if you will. I think that's the best way to handle this going forward. As funny as it is to poke fun at these people, I think we should be more good-natured than I've seen, and people should keep that in mind when trying to convince these people that we want to race next to their houses. That is important to note as well. As far as how the fair board meeting went the other night, it does appear as though support for the track outweighed support against the track, so that is good, but we're still ways away from getting any sort of confirmation from Speedway Motorsports in Bristol actually coming in there and beginning the renovation process. Still some other things have to be approved, some other boxes need to be checked. There will be more meetings like this, I'm sure. So hopefully sometime this summer we'll get a final definitive vote, and hopefully things go in favor of NASCAR and Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway, but that remains to be seen. Just wanted to share my 2 cents real quick because that's all anyone has been talking about the last couple days, and I just felt like I didn't have anything else to add aside from what I just mentioned. So, I mean, you guys know me. I don't typically like to confront antagonism with more antagonism. I feel like that isn't usually productive. Fighting fire with fire usually just burns the whole village down. I don't really operate that way, and I would encourage many NASCAR fans to maybe follow a similar philosophy. But that's all I've got to say on that, hoping for the best for Nashville Fairgrounds. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. What was your takeaway from watching those Nashville Fair Board meetings? What's your takeaway from Eddie Gossage announcing his retirement from Texas Motor Speedway? What's the future of that track look like? I'm sure it's about as up in the air as anything these days. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. We talk NASCAR news, predictions, rumors, race reviews every single day here at Out of the Groove. And of course, a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters. I couldn't do the show without your continued support. I really, really do appreciate it. It means a ton to me. We will be back here tomorrow with another episode. Dover is this weekend. Xfinity and Cup Cars will be at the Monster Mile. Very excited for that as well. I will see you all again very, very soon. Take care. Have a great rest of your Thursday.